Hi everyone, welcome to Osquery office hours. At least here in New England, it is rainy and blustery. I believe San Francisco has gone through much the same, and perhaps all of your locales are nicer, less nice, whatever. But welcome. So I think first order of business, usually announcements. I guess the big one is Apple released Monterey, is that right? I think a variety of people have some test devices with it. Haven't heard of any issues.
I ran it through the tests, and at least when you're using the SDK 10.12, it works. Everything works now. With the fix that I put in, it should work for 10.15. And I also tested on M1. So we have working, thanks to Alessandro and Stefano, we have libraries building for M1. So we're not to the point where we can make a universal build or anything. And we just disabled a couple of things to do initial testing. But yeah, it runs on M1. That's exciting. So progress.
Nice.
That's awesome news. Thanks, Cal.
Yeah, if anybody wants to test that branch, it's there in a draft PR, I guess.
The PR has builds linked to it.
Well, we don't have build artifacts yet, but it's something if you have an M1 machine, you can build, or you can try the cross compile to make an M1 binary. And if you like, otherwise, we're continuing to work on it.
Nice. Next section is kind of an open questions, issues, PRs. General intent here is for anyone in the community to raise something, especially people who don't show up all the time and aren't our regulars. So any of the folks here, if you've got any questions, concerns, want to raise them now or later on.
I have a couple of questions for y'all.
Fire away.
So I'm probably already been asked in the Slack, but I kind of just and ask the same questions again because some of the questions being asked in Slack were a couple of years old. So I want to get the most up-to-date information. So my first question to kick it off is running Osquery as a non-root user. Is it possible? What type of issues might someone run into if they tried to do that?
You can do that. Caveats are that Osquery will need write access to wherever its data directories are. And depending on what capabilities it's running with, it might not be able to read all of the things you'd expect to work. But which ones depend a lot on exactly what permissions you're running Osquery with and which operating system. And if you're running on Linux, you can grant additional capabilities that are not part of a normal runtime user. If you're running on Mac OS, you can't. The answer is roughly, it should work, but some things won't.
Generally, it won't fail by crashing or something like that. Like it will fail by not having data that it can't get access to.
Yeah, there's going to be empty rows, but you won't know why.
Yeah, and that's actually a great call out. Sometimes you'll get a warning on the verbose stream, the verbose error log. Sometimes you'll see nothing. Like if you try and query disk encryption, I think there's only a warning emitted if only a verbose warning emitted if it can't read it, and you'll just get back no rows.
And if I remember, there are some tables where you might. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, I was going to say this might help with the discussion. This is specifically around running on Linux. So specifically running as a non-root user on Linux. So
same answer.
Didn't know if that would change your...
It'll work. Some data may not be there. There is prior art doing things with Linux capabilities or systemd capabilities to grant elevated narrow permissions. You can find that buried somewhere in an issue or a pull request from J. Alsperth. I remember the GitHub username, right? Something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. Is there like a list of abilities?
Oh, sorry, Ben, you cut out.
I'll repeat. Oh, sorry. Can you all hear me now? is there a way to like generate a list of capabilities that someone might need to run as a non-root user? Is there a way to do that? Or is it just trial?
Trial and error. Broadly speaking, it's going to be like file system read. And, if you're doing anything in like the audit subsystem, if there's something there for you, or BPF. But I don't think we track it, and I'm not even sure it's possible to like enumerate it. So there's a little bit of just trial and error. And again, you don't need those. It's sort of a,
Yeah.
do you want that data or not want that data?
That's fair.
Yeah, no one documented them.
I think like processes
sorry.
you get partial.
Alex, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say like processes table, you get a partial list if you're not elevating.
Yeah, I was gonna say some Linux distribution are mounting the proc/proc with hide PID equal 2, which means basically the user cannot see any other process, can only see their own processes, and so PIDs and whatever. So again, if you're not root, you cannot see any other process that is not your own. I don't know if maybe there is some specific thing you can set and to say, but please at least this user let it see everything still. But yeah.
What's your use case or model for this? Are you just concerned about it running unrestrained, or is it just not possible to run as root? Like what?
I even asked if Osquery can be run as non-root. So I'm just kind of coming here to ask, is it possible? What are the areas we're going to run and do? And then have someone else kind of make that decision of, accepting risk or not running as root. So
Yeah, I mean, you could probably create a user that had most of the permissions you needed and scope it to run as that inside system D, right? Like there's a way to have it be not root, but still grant some of the capabilities you needed depending on what it was.
thank you all for that. And then this,
Oh, I was just going to say,
is there like a Linux profile or app armor profile for Osquery?
Having just dug through our repository, I see a little discussion of this. Poke around the stuff linked off the ticket I just sent to Slack. Seems to be where stuff's come out. I don't think we've ever talked about wanting to ship one, but there's definitely been like at least a little discussion in GitHub.
My one last question for you all. Do resource constraints of like how much CPU and memory Osquery can consume. Can you disable Watchdog safely, or should you leave Watchdog enabled?
Well,
Sorry, you cut out a bit there. I think you said C groups.
Yeah, so if you're using C groups to do resource constraints with CPU and memory, can you disable Watchdog safely? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the reliability of C groups, but I would say that Teddy, who certainly operated Osquery on millions of endpoints for years at Facebook, liked to use both C groups and the Watchdog.
So my understanding is that C groups will be a reasonable enforcement mechanism. So if you want to like make sure something doesn't spiral out of control, C groups would do that. But Watchdog may provide a more Osquery friendly way to enforce that limitation. I would have to review this stuff. I'm not real sure. If you're not concerned about any kind of strong data integrity guarantees, like if you're willing to drop events occasionally, I can't imagine you would need to use Watchdog, right? Because C groups may just come along and womp the process out from under it, and that may, I'm not sure you're guaranteed integrity.
One of the differences there, right, is that Watchdog will not only kill the worker, but it will blacklist the query if it's too expensive. Whereas with C groups, you might just start slamming into the ceiling kind of over and over again. And, it'll be constrained to whatever resources you give the C group, but you might not ever know, or it will certainly take longer to discover that the queries you're running are misconstructed or not the most optimal.
That's actually
That's a
good
great
context.
point, Eric. And furthermore, with the watchdog, when those queries are killed by the watchdog, you'll get logging to indicate which query it was that was misbehaving and that kind of thing. And also the OS query schedule table will include information about that. Whereas, not only, like Eric said, will you be potentially bumping up against the limit over and over, but you'll also have no information about which query was causing that limit to be hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Ben, did you
I
just say
said
something?
That was all my questions. Sorry if my internet's being terrible.
Oh,
Happy to have
Thanks.
the questions. Thank you.
yeah, thanks for bringing the questions, Ben.
Questions from other people?
I was just checking in. It's been so long. Want to see everybody's face.
Hi, Alex. Welcome back.
Thank you. My internet's not much better than Ben's, I'm afraid. So
Oh, still nice to see you here.
Hey, good to see you, Alex. So
likewise.
are you working with OS Query in your job these days at all?
Not much. I mean, it's kind of on the nice to have list soon. So I've got this thing where I can run OS query as like a child process and feed it queries kind of interactively. But yeah, it's not like full OS query like at Alien Bowl. Yeah.
Well, glad to see you here, and I hope we'll see more of you in the future.
Thank you.
I keep needing to feed OS query random queries, so I keep writing little widgets to talk to the thrift extension, so I don't have to deal with shell nonsense.
Wow.
It turned out it's like remarkably easy if you have a language that supports thrift, which all of mine do. Then it's pretty smooth. The thrift definitions make it really easy. I think I plumbed that through Ruby recently, and it was a couple of hours of finding the right thrift options, and then it just worked great.
A couple of hours. You are persistent. I don't have your patience, I'm afraid. Some of this, like one of the things I would love still, years ago, we talked about doing a refactor of how the tables are done and breaking up OS query into something a little more modular. I'd still love to get to that point.
It'd be nice.
Yeah.
It's funny, like a couple of hours of digging through thrift options sounds like a lot, but I know that over the course of 2 weeks, I'd spend more than that on like shell nonsense of like, where's the PID? Why did this die? Why didn't this die? Is the string new line parsing right? So see it as like an upfront cost versus a ongoing. Hey, welcome. Always fun to have you around.
Thank you.
So is there a OS Query RB coming?
I don't know if I'll open source it. There's just not much to it.
Yeah.
I pushed the little bit that had to happen into the thrift file like 2 releases ago. And then, I mean, there's just, I don't know how to write it like a Ruby SDK that feels like Ruby-ish, right? It's just like create thrift socket, send query down thrift socket. So probably a better tweet or blog post or something. Yeah. Well,
I have half a question, I guess. Something
Yeah.
that actually came up to me today that I had sort of half an answer for.
bring it up.
Password policy, checking if password policies are set on endpoints. Oh dear. Always a reassuring sound. So on Windows, you can query the registry, and that's fine. And on Mac OS, you can, I suppose, check and see if the policies have been pushed down. But I don't know of any table or even like querying throughplists or other things that would tell you if the policy had actually been set, and it's been on my mind today, so I figured I'd bring it up.
Let me go look up the internal Collide docs on this one. So someday we might write a blog post. And,
Yeah, I mean, you guys have the blog post on Screen Locker that I reference from time to time, but password policies.
so one of the things there's a sorry, I just cut someone off.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's an account policy data table which plugs into Open Directory.
It does, but it doesn't. It only has like when the password was set and.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out if Open Directory has an API that can. I vaguely remember it had like something like an enum that would say like, oh, is password alphanumeric or something,
So
but I'll have to.
Skimming my notes for this. There is a command line that you can invoke that I don't think we've done any real reverse engineering around, and there are profiles that you can install. So the Collide recommendation here is to have people install profiles and then audit through to the existence of those profiles.
Yeah, and we can check for the existence of profiles via MDM. It's just interesting from that's like it should be, and then validating that like it has been done from something in the system. All right.
Well, so from Osquery, you can check that policies are in place, or maybe that's a Collide table. I don't remember, but you could certainly investigate checking policies.
Right.
One of the things that has seemed very hard in this entire space across all the platforms actually is that password complexity is only applied at password change time. So you have to, there's this funny like, okay, it looks like we have the right policies.
Yeah, time of check, time of use error
But
problems.
how do I know that the existing accounts comply with it? And you have to kind of like fudge it a little bit. So you've got that. And then on Windows, I started digging into how do you actually confirm that there are no Windows accounts with blank passwords, and it's real ugly. I haven't finished that work. I think you have to extract the NTLM hashes and compare them to known hashes, which we talked about in the last meeting, a meeting or two ago or something. I haven't gotten any further on that.
Yeah, I'll dig into that a little bit more. All right, thanks.
Linux has the same caveats, and you get to examine things like PAM and pwquality.conf and login defs, depending on which the operating system is.
Okie dokie.
Harass Fritz into writing a blog post.
I will. I haven't harassed Fritz in a minute. Thank you.
And it sounded like, Charvo, you think there might be some API that could be added to that existing table that would include some limited information about this?
I'm not sure about the API, but back in the day, there used to be a directory utility or DSCL, and it had a bunch of attributes.
Yeah, I mean, you can check the password policy and other things on the system with shell commands. It's just not built into Osquery.
There's PW policy. Is I think the current shell command for it, but I don't know if that replaced the directory one or not.
And so, I mean, it's certainly possible to write a quick Osquery extension to shell out and look at something like that.
Yeah, that's probably where it's going to end up. I don't think there's APIs built in to query it directly, but if there is, maybe we'll have a new table.
Of course, can also turn to the old what was it, Frogger talk of how to reverse engineer private APIs on Mac OS to get the capabilities into Osquery.
There is that.
QueryCon 2017 or something like that.
18.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Hopefully I'll have things to report. Otherwise, we'll see. I'm good. Thanks.
Other questions? If not, moving on to agenda items. Charvel, output size column in the Osquery schedule table.
Yeah, back in the day, we used to have a output size column. And I think it got removed during the code lockdown. And I don't exactly know the context because there isn't a linked PR. Apparently, it wasn't a reliable metric. But we still have that in the query packs and in the schema, and it's causing some confusion. And I haven't dug into it yet, but even if it's inaccurate data or not exact count of bytes, is it still a useful metric to have?
So you linked to an issue that I created.
Yep.
And I brought this up in an office hours somewhere in the last year. I don't remember where, I'm sorry. And my recollection from having kind of done a little bit of this research, maybe also with Zach doing a little bit of this poking around, is that it was removed because it wasn't strictly accurate. Like in the face of maybe diffs or maybe just like wire compression, there was some amount of like, well, this isn't the exact amount of bytes, so let's strike this for inaccuracy. I found the diff at one point. But there's sort of consensus for me, Zach, and whoever else was in the office hours where I brought this up last time, that there would be value in having it back, even imprecisely.
I'd love to see it. Yeah, I mean, if it just has to be, whatever we can get, the most reasonable metric we can get would be super useful. And I think it's important to be able to surface to Osquery users some sense of how much data their queries are generating. At the worst, if only just relative to their other queries, if the number is kind of magical, it's still better than nothing. Whether that should be in the existing output size column or we should add a new column, I don't feel super strongly. I think it'd be fine to put it in output size and just document in the column description that it's estimated. But I think it would be great to bring that back in some way.
I can probably dig up the diff again that removed it. I probably dug through the history on the actual item that did it and like went row by row to find the one that deleted it.
Oh, let's see. It's linked in this issue here, actually.
Oh, yeah, right. It is linked.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what the level of effort on this is. I haven't really dug into it, but we have had a little bit of refactor and changes in the scheduler. So I'll try to see or create a POC and see what I can do.
My suspicion is it's probably pretty easy just to almost bring back the code that was removed verbatim. Yeah, it just looks like it was struck because people thought it was too inaccurate. But I feel like that's probably not the current sense of the room. So.
Okay.
Alessandro, I think, well, people want to talk about Puffy SID PRs or people want to talk about CA file updates? I think I want to talk about CA file
I added
updates.
both of those because I'm interested in talking about both potentially.
I want to talk about the CA
put
file.
Alessandro on the spot, but I know that Alessandro had a lot of feedback on the Puffy SID PRs.
I want to talk about the CA file stuff because I think it's small.
Yeah, I think it should be. I think this is a PR that somebody just submitted this morning or today-ish.
My gut
The
sense is that
CA.
I don't want to accept a random PR to the CAs from someone who I don't know, but I would happily accept automation or scripting that refetches it from Mozilla.
For sure. I think that we should not just update it without any verification. I think that their suggestion explicitly in the PR was that we ought to verify the integrity of what they're submitting there. Maybe like two of us can go download what's on the Mozilla site and diff against it if we want to move quickly to merge this, which I would love to do, or if we can get some automation into the repo to do it, I think that would be great. They did provide the script in the PR that they used to get this.
Yeah, this script seems easier to audit.
So, I mean, to move forward on this,
I'm going to suggest that they remove the PEMs and only submit the script, and that they sign the CLA.
okay,
Unless you want to do it differently.
that's fine with me. And then someone will follow up by using the script if we feel comfortable with the script to make the update.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that they would like credit for it and that we shouldn't just take the idea and run with it. So
Yeah.
I'll reply here.
Cool.
Okay. He said PRs.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the Puffy Sid PRs, I got the impression from Alessandro that there are some that Alessandro feels like it could be reasonable to move forward with. I'm personally of the opinion that if Alessandro feels comfortable, then I'm comfortable, and so. I mean, are there other things that need to happen to move forward with these ones, or is Alessandro's kind of agreement that these could be done enough to move forward?
The three ones listed, I try to help make them progress forward. So for the 7160, the third one, about the binary tables for ELF, MEC-O, and PE, I will help out in porting libraries to the new platforms. So I'll revisit the CMake we have, and I'll port them to update the library if it is required, and make them work on all the platforms, M1 included. We still have to go through the code review process. I know that we have left a couple of changes, requests for changes that were fixed. So hopefully it's going to be quick to do the remaining parts.
Sorry, I get very blurred by all of these because there's a lot, and they kind of cover a pretty big range of stuff. I feel somewhat unsure which of these we want to accept. And I feel like there's a very open question about whether we want Osquery to try and be a really good incident forensics tool or not. And if we do, what that sort of entails.
Yes. So the 3 pull requests there are 2 of them have, or rather, yeah, 2 of them have prior art in Osquery. So the FS events D table is similar to the Windows table we have to check the NTFS journal, which was originally implemented because there was really not a better way to do it without having system drivers or external dependencies. The binary tables, we already have them for ELF, so this makes them feature parity with all the other platforms. And then, of course, the unified access logging parser, 7259. This is also useful.
Yeah, and the unified access logging is also basically the equivalent of Windows event log, which we have, and Linux syslog, which we have, and it's the replacement for ASL, which we've had for a long time. So to me, it's pretty clear that one does fit in the scope.
These 3 all feel like they fit the scope, unlike some of the other ones. I said there's a lot, and I get a little tangled.
Yeah, but for the remaining ones, I share Seth's sentiment.
So yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Alessandro.
No, I was just saying that the 7261 is particularly complex. I detailed my reasoning there. There's a lot of happening in there. A lot of it is parsing the file system manually using VTSK library. And there's a lot of attack surface area in there. So, and the jump list table is also particularly complex. There are 3 formats, one on top of the other, that are only partially documented and really hard to get right. I don't think I want to talk about doc exploits of Microsoft Office and Word and so on. So if we really, I would not include it, but if we are going to support it, I think we should try and implement it in different parts with fuzzing and proper libraries with unit testing.
Okay, so we'll kick those ones forward, and that puts us at these 3. So do they just need reviewers? Do they need deeper thought?
I think that at this point we should, in my opinion, decide which ones are allowed to progress. Close the ones that are not, because otherwise the contributor will keep working on it. And I feel bad if we do not provide an answer on whether they can be merged or not. And for the remaining ones that we know we can merge, I think we have to focus on a single one at a time, because otherwise we are spread too thin. Since there's some of them require some changes, some letter factor, and if we focus on a single one, it is easier to get it done and merge it.
So my understanding is that most of the concerns around the forensics kind of stuff have to do with the difficulty of parsing, and so therefore the possibility of like Osquery becoming a vector for privilege escalation. Like, am I understanding that correctly?
That's one.
But also the added maintenance burden.
Mm-hmm.
But also understanding what is Osquery and what is not. Like right now, there is no prior art on this kind of usage in Osquery, and I feel like we are trying to force it inside. And when you when we deal with these kind of things, forensic is really a different usage compared to Osquery. It doesn't value as much the goals we have when running as a daemon, so not using too much memory, not wasting too much CPU, and so on. For a forensic tool, it is perfectly fine if the machine slows down for a while, and it is not acceptable to interrupt the workload, because otherwise you cannot get results you're looking for. But this doesn't really work well with Osquery as a daemon.
I feel like I have sort of similar existential questions or concerns of, I think a successful project, especially sort of an open source one, needs a very clear vision and problem that it's solving. And I don't know that we want to pull forensics into scope for what we do. Maybe we do. Like I honestly don't know. You know, we haven't before, and it feels like a somewhat different use case. So I'm a little bit worried that we will never be good at it without sort of significant investment. And I don't have I'm a little bit worried that doing a poor job at forensics kind of just muddies what we are in a way that I don't know is beneficial. And I'm honestly not sure. Like, I don't have an answer here. And I see some things like, okay, unified access log, that sort of fits with what we've done. We should add that. And then I run into like the Mcache stuff, and I'm like, I don't know. Raw registry parsing is getting pretty far from where our core strength is right now. So I feel like there's a question of what are we, and are we empowered to say no, and kind of what do we want to be in 5 years? I don't have the answers to that one. I just see a question.
I mean, I could say that not in my current work now with Fleet, but in some of my prior consulting work, there are certainly organizations that are reaching to Osquery as a tool to do some forensic work, because they like the SQL model and they like the rest of everything else that comes with Osquery, and they like that they like the way that it produces the logs and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean that we have to embrace Osquery being that way, but that is certainly a reality that I've seen out there. It also seems like, based on the level of concern from everyone on this, it does seem like someone attempting to maintain like a Osquery forensics extension or something would be a fruitful way to go about this. And then if you're using it in a forensic context, you just deploy the extension along with it.
I'd probably even be willing to have Osquery host that extension in its development. There's some interesting questions there about what endorsements do we have and whatnot, but I'm not opposed to it. It just feels like a very big step to pull that into core, and I don't know. Like, I see these questions and it feels very existential.
But mostly with extensions, we have additional options. We can more easily sandbox it. If, for example, we end up using TSK to parse an NTFS partition, it doesn't matter if the partition is malformed and the library loops forever, because it's an extension. The watcher will kill it sooner or later. The query keeps working fine. And the way I see it is, with each new functionality, if it is not an artifact that we can acquire with system APIs, we are increasing attack surface. And we are already risking more than we already have if we introduce the binary parsing tables. Like, we have to find some kind of limit and stay within it, I think. I understand that the main concern I see when people want to merge in core is because the extensions are hard to deploy. I don't know if it is the only complaint, but I think it is the right way to go. Not because I don't want things in core, but because the extensions are going to keep Osquery working fine. And even if we were to ship these tables within the main installer, it would be better than merging in core.
To start with that last point, Alessandro, are you saying like if we were to make an official Osquery forensics extension, put these tables in there, and then ship it with the default Osquery installation, and someone could enable it if they wanted to, you feel like that's better than merging it into core?
Yeah, because we have stronger guarantees of keeping Osquery up and running, even if the extension misbehaves. This is just for uptime. It doesn't fix the problem that this parser could be exploited, because we do not support sandboxing yet. But there is a way. If it is a different process, it is something we can tackle.
And maybe to make this a less sprawling conversation, Zach called out 3 PRs that we probably are willing to accept. So what are the next steps on those?
My understanding is that the unified log, what's proposed there is just a slight modification from the existing PR.
So there was a PR that Trail of Bits started, and then I think just got distracted and dropped on the floor. So I believe this just ports it forward, since it's been a few releases.
Yeah, I closed the old PR. This one is replacement.
Yeah.
So is this one relatively easy to get to because of the prior art there?
I would have hoped so, but now there's discussion about whether it's possible to craft runaway queries because of range filtering or something. I think this was a criticism from Alessandro. I don't know.
No, I documented it inside our internal document, but it was actually from Stefan.
Oh.
Yeah, I did review that. So, I mean, this is similar to other tables, but obviously you can do select star from unified logger table, and you get everything from it. So you get stuck in it, and until Osquery get killed because it consumes all memory.
Same thing as ASL then.
Sorry?
Same as ASL.
Yeah, except
Was
the
ASL like that?
It's a heck of a lot higher. Just the amount of stuff in the unified system log it's incredibly more voluminous than ASL ever was.
ASL will melt an Osquery.
We sort of tackled a similar problem with the file table, like a select star from file does nothing instead of doing the entire file system. Like, can we do similar with unified log?
That can be done, I think, but at the same time, I'm wondering. I mean, I understand that it was a problem that was present before, but can't we try to do a little better? So definitely, the constraint, as you say, it's better. I wonder if using the streaming API so that at least it doesn't grow memory usage that much, it would actually permit it to return more rows in theory. Because with those tables, the issue you have to first collect all the rows and then you can ship them to the rest. So if you can instead ship them not one by one, but in batches, then yeah, it improves definitely.
I mean
but yeah,
I feel like we should just enforce some kind of limit constraint here and move on.
I mean, the streaming API sort of makes more sense if depending. You could also do something similar to file where you had to ship a predicate to some kind of filter to the logging subsystem before it would start returning data.
I feel like, so without super deep thought, I feel like there's a couple of uses for logging. One of them is an event-based table where you're basically seeing events, and I think the streaming API would probably be a good fit for events-based tables. And the other one is when you're digging through the logs, being like, tell me if I got logs for this program. and I'm not sure the streaming API makes as much sense when you're fishing through logs, but I think enforcing a limit or requiring a predicate can make sense there.
Makes sense.
I kind of want to do whatever's easy and then see how people use these things. But
So when folks talk about the streaming API, are you suggesting we would do something like, it would be like a unified log events table?
No, so we have in Osquery the support. We use coroutines to return results from the table before having it collect all the rows. So we can. I think I don't recall which other table uses it.
There's like, it's like a generator kind of pattern.
Yeah, exactly. So in theory, that should help move along the data without having any buffer grow that much.
Maybe we could kind of move forward on this by one, make you not return anything unless there's some predicate provided, and two, use that generator, sorry, the streaming API that you called it. Like between those two things, does that seem like a reasonable way forward?
So there's also a third problem. Well, I haven't, that time I hadn't that much time, but I noticed that there are issues with evaluating the constraint. So a simple single constraint that, again, I don't know, on time you evaluate, time is greater or less than words. If you, and this is maybe weird, I know, but if you actually try to, let's say, exclude an area of time, so you use 2 times the, so it's both greater than something and less than something else, then it will not work correctly. It will only respect one of the 2 constraints, basically. So it won't return the.
Is that a function of the implementation or the underlying API?
This is, I'm not sure. Yeah, underlying, the filtering is done by the underlying macOS API. Yeah, so I'm not sure if it is something, just a limit, or it's how we construct the constraint. But yeah, I mean, again, it's maybe not a huge issue. There is this thing. Again, I don't know though if there are other interactions that might interest us more, which are broken. That's it. We have to look into it a bit more, I guess.
And is this possibly stemming from like Osquery, or the table implementation is collecting up all the predicates provided and then using that to generate like a query in whatever the unified log query API is, and there might be like an issue of converting those things appropriately?
Yeah, so as far as I recall, all the constraints are correctly arriving to the table, but it's how we construct those that expression, and I think it's how we construct it, or some limit on the unified logger API. So how we construct that expression and pass it to the unified logger API to filter the messages. Probably that's the part that it is not working. And again, I'm not sure if it's due to the construction or a limit of the API itself.
There was an MR a while ago to have events not kind of skip the storage and querying part, and it just goes to logging. Did that ever go through?
No.
Okay.
And that raises some deep questions for me as well about what the purpose of Osquery is. Like if you're skipping effectively the SQL layer, like do we want to become a log shipper, or is that better left in the hands of other tooling? And same questions. Conversely, Alessandro did a lot of work to optimize those layers, so it's not clear there's still a performance bottleneck there.
Yeah, I think you guys know my feeling of Osquery is awesome at querying on demand, and But for events, I think it should be a different architecture. I mean, could still be an Osquery, but just not the way it's implemented.
So speaking again about those 5 pull requests, I'm going to change the phrasing. It's not that I am not comfortable. I think the problem is that the TSC has to reach a consensus on whether they are going to be merged or not. And I think we should decide on their fate sooner rather than later, in the next couple of days.
I think it makes sense to impose a deadline to get to that. I mean, it sounded like there might be some general agreement about having some sort of official forensics extension.
Yeah.
Like, shall we propose going forward with that and try it? I know we have always had this vision of things can start out as extensions and move into Osquery core if they are found to be useful enough and well supported enough and that kind of thing.
So I'll shift that slightly, which is to say, who's taking on the work of creating the general framework for the extension? Not any tables inside it so much as just, making a repo is super easy, but like dropping enough scaffolding there that it builds and will create an extension. And I suspect that's a surprisingly weird set of work for maybe anyone other than Trail of Bits, who probably does this all the time.
Depends on what are the guarantees we want to provide. If we want to just guarantee that the Osquery doesn't die, it's easy. If we want to guarantee that Osquery doesn't get exploited, then someone has to look into sandboxing. So I would not enable this extension by default without sandboxing.
I think a question is, though, do we allow development to begin on an extension like this without sandboxing?
I think it is fine if someone decides that they want to just use it. I am not against it. In fact, we do have NTFS forensics extension in our repository.
What did you mean specifically for sandboxing?
So
Elevation
there are
versus, go ahead.
So it depends on the platform. Like on Windows, we can do less things compared to Linux. But with sandboxing, I mean implementing any kind of logic to at least mitigate possible exploitation of the parsers. Like if we were to use like the NTFS forensics, for example, table extension works by parsing out of data. There are many things that can go wrong in there, and I think it would be nice if we had a mechanism to at least drop privileges and confine what happens if it is exploited.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I think there were a few things here. So one was maybe Seth had some concern about what would it take to like do the admin and scaffolding work to create an extension repo, or would it even go into the main Osquery repo but just be built differently?
I'd rather it was a separate repo, at least until we really embraced it.
Yeah.
I'm sort of I'm always willing to revisit stuff, but I feel like at least initially we'd probably be happier with a separate repo that, is kind of a little bit of an experiment. And then if we decide, yeah, Osquery really wants to take on forensics, then we should pull it back all into core. And if we want to keep it where it is, then we keep it where it is.
Hello.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if we could basically pull the structure out of the Trail of Bits extensions repo and put that into a new repo in Osquery. I'm not familiar with C++ extensions like I know some of you are.
Yeah, I think it is possible to just copy our Osquery extensions repository and just delete the tables in there and start fresh.
I feel like
Well,
it's also.
I have to run, y'all. I think I agree with Alessandro. We should try to come to a decision on this and how we do that. I don't know, but we should do it soon. And I'd say if we feel like the other 3 PRs can move forward, we should let Puffy Sid know and try and get the process moving on those. The other ones we can let them know that it's still pending, but I mean, it looks like it sounds plausible that we might be able to reach a good compromise here.
I left a really simple poll where you can vote and provide an explanation for it if you want it or you don't want it. If you can have a look at it when you have some time, I think it makes things easier.
I get a little overwhelmed because this stuff seems to devolve into several pages of conversation very rapidly.
Oh yeah, so thank you, Zach. I tried to summarize.
It's not your fault. It's just the reality.
Yeah, that's true. But I think I summarized the reasons in maybe 7-8 points.
No, I can figure it out. It is 2. Mac's gone. I probably have to go soon. Is there anything else people want to bring up in closing?
Yeah, one last thing. We have the PPF publisher tree. It's broken. It's going to cause Osquery to crash. We have the pull request up. If someone can take a second look at it, maybe we can also take a second look at it internally.
Remind me what number that is.
Sure. It's let me check. 7302.
Okay, Charvel, did you have a closing note?
Yeah, on the password policy, I found an API that'll give us the data, but it got deprecated in macOS 10.9. I'm not sure if it still works, and I'm not sure if there's a replacement. But I put a note in the thing above.
Cool. Thanks for dropping that note in. Anything else? Okay. Nice to see everyone.
SVP presentation.
And
anything else?
you all online.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Right.